I forgot to tell my son that the cameras at the dockyard were back on. And that night, when I played the footage, my guts dropped. My son, Mark, and his wife, Leah, sneaked in like the masters of the place, sprinkling black powder on the boat's electrical panel and whispering, "Sunday, 5:40." That's when the fire started. They weren't coming to fix it. They were going to turn my livelihood into an accident and let the fire do the rest. What they didn't know was that the man they were going to wipe out had set the trap for them to walk into at dawn. Pause for a moment and imagine your Alan sitting at the kitchen table, watching your son on the small screen plot the fire that would consume his life. What would your next move be? Before we get into the details, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I got the camera in my marina storage shed working again on a chilly afternoon that smelled like salt. The wind off the water tasted briny and rough, and the buoys clacked against hulls like loose marbles in a jar. Standing on a short wooden stool, I tightened the bracket, wiped the lens, and plugged the power back in. My phone screen lit up. The metal ladder, the shelves, coils of cable, and the bow of the boat I'd been servicing slid into view. I panned through the corners, checked the exposure, tapped the record button, and heard a little click, like the system nodding back at me. "Good," I muttered, smiling to myself. The surge a few weeks back had fried the setup. Seeing it alive again felt like the house had grown an extra pair of eyes. I meant to text my son, "Camera's fixed, don't worry." But just as I opened a new message, a couple of old-timers outside hollered that it was quitting time. Same guys as me, dock rats through and through. I set the phone down, swept my tools into a canvas bag, and forgot the text. All I could think about was a hot bowl of chowder and a full night's sleep. Home's a 10-minute walk from the marina. On the porch, I hung up my coat and cracked a window so the sea breeze could chase out the machine oil. Dill, lemon peel, and clam broth warmed the kitchen. I ate by the window while the dock lights winked like fish eyes. Little things floated back to me. Next week's maintenance schedule, a new slip fee sheet taped in the harbor master's office, Margaret's old leather gloves tucked in a drawer. Now just the smell of leather and baby powder. It was so quiet I almost believed I could forget the hard angles of the last few years. Margaret gone, the rooms hollow, Mark marrying Leah, the two of them drifting between plans and the kind of money that's always a bit short. I told myself I'm old, sure, but as long as I have strength, I'll help where I can and keep this place from smelling like damp. Late that night, with the dishes dry, I poured tea and leaned back. New habit, check the camera before bed. The picture was black, a dock light slicing a bright knife across the dark. I let it run, listening to the tide. A shadow slipped by, then another. The shed door eased open, one figure sliding inside, pausing to listen, then signaling someone behind. I blinked hard against the glare, then knew the shape, Mark, narrow shoulders, a quick step that stalls whenever a plank groans. Leah followed, slim, gloved, hair pitched forward to hide part of her face. I held my breath. Neither of them knew the camera was alive again. They moved like they owned the place, scanning corners. Leah pulled a small black bag from her coat and dusted the electrical panel with a fine charcoal powder. Her fingers pinched the way you'd salt a dish. Mark nudged a secondary breaker with a pair of cutters, watching her face for approval, his jaw tight as rope. I turned the audio up all the way. Leah cocked her head, checked her watch, and spoke so softly I had to lean in, but every word was clean. "Sunday, 5:40 a.m. That's when the fire starts." My heart skipped, then started pounding. Mark's voice shook. Are you sure?" "Northeast wind," Leah said, curling her lip. "Dry. The fire will crawl up the wall. The first 2 minutes decide everything." No wobble, no doubt. I felt hollow, like somebody popped the hatch and drained me. I rewound and zoomed in on the doorknob, the bottom rung of the ladder. Grainy, not enough to trust my eyes. I almost ran down there then and there, but something told me to wait. Before sunup, I pulled on a coat, slid my glasses into a pocket, tucked the phone beside them, and headed to the docks. At the shed door, I hesitated. Same lock, same latch. But it didn't feel right. Same only on the surface. I opened up and hit the lights. A thin, smoke-colored smear clung under the ladder. The plastic burnt smell hadn't lifted. I knelt and held my phone to the floor, snapping picture after picture. On the panel face were a few faint, fresh scratches. Nothing if you don't do this work. Obvious if you do. A bit of charcoal was caught under a hinge, as dark as a spent match head. My fingers trembled, not from the cold. I called Sam, my friend at the precinct, 15 years on this patch of coast. He picked up fast, voice low and steady. "What's up, Steve?" "I'm at the shed," I said, slow so I wouldn't clip words. The camera caught Mark and Leah in here. They dusted the panel with charcoal. Leah said, "Sunday, 5:40 a.m., that's when the fire starts." Paper rustled on his end. 3 seconds of silence. "You safe?" "I'm outside now. Locked it back up. I took pictures." "Send them. Leave the docks. Meet me at the cafe by the post office. 15 minutes. I turned the key, stepped onto the boards. The water was inkwell black. The dock lights were fading and swaying in the sea breeze, making sleepy, shifting halos. My head sounded like a drawer full of loose screws, but one image cut through. Mark at 12, skin and bones, tying a hook too big to a line too thin, running to me when it snagged a net. "Dad, help!" Now, who was calling who? We sat by the window in the cafe. Sam scrolled through every photo and frame, zooming, rewinding. He set the phone down and looked at me. "Catching them with the goods is cleaner," he said. "With the goods?" My throat rasped. "Don't spook them. You go about your day like nothing's wrong. I'll put people around the marina. We wait until they show with the materials. When they roll up with gasoline, a timer, whatever they need, we move. Your clip and these photos make it airtight." "They're my kids, Sam." "That's exactly why we do it right," he said, eyes steady on mine. "If this were a stranger, you'd dial 911 and step back. When it's family, you do it by the book so no one can say you framed them or set a trap. You need to be safe, and the record needs to be clean." I exhaled. I didn't think Leah could say that line like she was talking about dinner. "Some folks drift because the tide takes them," he said. "Some pick their current." He nudged my mug closer. "Don't go alone anymore. I'll keep your number hot." That evening, Mark and Leah came by. Leah carried a basket of bread. Mark brought sodas. When they crossed the threshold, it felt like a draft of someone else's weather. New perfume, soft but quick steps. "Hey, Dad," Mark said, smile a shade too bright. "Rough day on the docks?" So. I set my spoon down. "I'll be at the shed tomorrow. Probably won't be home for lunch. You two can cook for yourselves. I'll be back later." Leah's voice softened instantly. "We'll pack you a lunch to take. Roast chicken and potatoes? Isn't that your favorite?" "Up to you," I said, keeping my tone even. "By the way, Leah, you were looking into the slip fees for this month. Hear anything?" She grinned. "Working on it. I think they went up a bit. Maybe you should sell the big boat. Seems a shame to let it sit." Mark jumped in. "We meant selling the old one to get a smaller one, Dad." "Sure," I nodded. "We'll see." I looked at Mark. "How's the shop treating you?" He glanced away. "It's fine. I'm training on something new. Might switch crews. Need me to put in a word anywhere? I'll figure it out." Leah's smile didn't touch her eyes. "You should relax more. That's your job now. Right, Mark?" He nodded and kept quiet. It looked like a pleasant dinner, but the clink of forks on plates sounded dry. I poured tea and slid the cups their way. Leah said, "Eat regular meals, okay? You've lost weight." "I've gotten older, not lighter," I joked. "Age sheds pounds on its own." "Light, heavy, either way you're strong," Mark said. "Just drive slow." "I will," I said. "Slow enough to see the road." I checked the camera before bed. The feed came alive. Mark and Leah were back at the shed, moving quicker now, more sure. Leah crouched and fussed with something inside the panel. Mark watched the door, glancing up at the camera that, to him, was still a dead eye. Leah pulled out her phone and put it on speaker. "Dax, can you hear me?" she said. "Everything's set. He'll be here working tomorrow. Be ready. The place will burn tomorrow. On schedule." A man's voice came through, deep and rough. "Good. Gas cans in the back lot. Text when you're close." "Bring the timer," Leah said. "The other one fires a minute late." "Yeah," Mark broke in. "Do we need another trial run?" "No," Leah sliced the word clean. "Too many passes leave prints." "And my dad," Mark's voice caught. "What if he said he'd be at the shed," Leah said flat and cold. "Did you forget?" "He didn't," Dax drawled. "Quit talking. Be there on time." I set the phone down and sat very still. For a long stretch, I didn't think anything at all. The only thing in my head was the slap of water against pilings, steady as a metronome. Then I called Sam. "They phoned a guy named Dax," I said. "He stashed a gas can in the back lot." "Heard it," Sam said. "Tomorrow 5:30. Meet at the spot. Don't go near the shed." "Got it." "Sleep, Steve. Morning's going to be busy." At first light, a knock. Mark and Leah stood there with a lunchbox. "Take this for lunch," Leah said, setting it in my hands. "Roast chicken, potatoes, an apple. Eat and rest." "Thanks," I said. Mark's mouth was a hard line. "Be careful, Dad." "I always am," I said, holding his gaze. "Careful means nobody gets hurt." Leah gave a laugh without warmth. "Don't be so dramatic." "It's a habit," I said, nodding. "Head on home. Don't stand in this wind." They walked away. Mark glanced back for half a second and then picked up his pace. I drove toward the marina, parked close, and didn't go in. I cut down the path along the pines and hung a left into the back lot, a notch of gravel and stacked crates only dock workers know. Two cruisers idled a ways apart, radio antennas humming. Sam ushered me into a third car and pointed at the back seat. "Stay down," he said. "If they spot you, they'll spook." I nodded and gripped my phone. The video cued, the photos cued. My palms ran damp, but my pulse stayed even. Age teaches you how to count your own beats. An hour later, a dark pickup crawled into the lot, lights off, engine low. Dax hopped out first, big shoulders, checked the bed. Mark's little sedan swung around toward the pier, with Leah in the passenger seat. I saw her lean into the trunk and lift a heavy canvas bag. Sam pressed his radio. "Positions 2 and 3, hold distance. When all three are inside the shed's approach lane, we go." The radio hissed. The car smelled like old leather and warm plastic. It reminded me of road trips I took long ago. Only this morning there wasn't any laughter. Dax hefted a small plastic drum. Mark grabbed a gas can. Leah hugged the canvas bag to her side. 5 steps past the white line painted on the pavement, close enough to the door, and Sam dropped his hand. "Now!" 2 cruisers flashed and whooped once. Tires bit gravel. "Police! Don't move! Drop it!" Mark flinched and fumbled the can. Leah stepped back a fraction, a quick spark in her eyes. Dax growled, "We're just doing a job." With gasoline, a timer, and scorched work gloves, Sam's voice turned to San. "Drop it." 2 officers closed in. Dax tensed for a heartbeat and was cuffed before he finished the thought. Mark stammered, "We were cleaning up, fixing the wiring." Leah switched to a softer gear. "My father-in-law asked us to take a look. I didn't ask anybody anything," I said, stepping out and holding up my tablet. "But I do have something you should see." The screen filled with last night's footage. Leah dusting charcoal over the panel, Mark nudging the breaker, Leah tipping her head and saying clear as a bell, "Sunday, 5:40 a.m. That's when the fire starts." I slid to the stills. The smoky smear under the ladder, charcoal on the knob, fresh scratches on the panel face. Leah bit her lip and scanned our faces like she was hunting for a door that hadn't been locked yet. Mark looked at me, eyes glassy. Dad, why? I asked, my voice calm in a way that surprised me. I, his shoulders sagged. I owe money. I thought, Leah said, I repeated, without taking my eyes off her. She said a lot. She said the fire starts at 5:40. She said northeast wind. She said too many passes leave prints. She said it'll burn on time. Anything else you want to add? Leah's smile cracked. You won because you got lucky, old man. I won, I said, because I don't burn my own house down. Sam flicked his hand. Cuff them. Come. Mark lifted his head. Dad, Don't lie again, Mark, I said, soft but final. Don't make a mess you'll have to clean for the rest of your life. They walked him past me. Dax cursed and got pressed over a fender. Leah kept her eyes straight ahead. Paperwork carried us to noon. In a small room at the station, I wrapped both hands around a paper cup of warm water while Sam floated in and out with a thin stack, custody forms, a statement, a receipt for the clips and photos. Sign here, he said. I'll read them, I answered, sliding my glasses on and moving line by line. You check a form like you wire a panel, Sam chuckled. I work that way, I said. A loose connection burns a house. He nodded. You're done. We'll handle the rest. Mark, what happens to him? He'll have a lawyer. There's a process. Today he's alive. So are you. I let out a long breath. It felt like swimming against a rip and finally getting a toe to touch bottom. By afternoon, the docks were quiet again. Cables squeaked and the salt in the air got heavier. I carried a big sheet of paper to the community board and taped up a stage fire watch list. I wrote out, check the breakers before you lock up. Seal your doorknob, thin tape works. Mount your camera high, away from glare. Keep a foam extinguisher handy and practice with it. If you smell an odd scorch, go back and kill the power. Never leave with live circuits. If you live alone, let a neighbor know your work hours. At the bottom I added, small odd things, big warnings. Don't shrug them off. I stepped back and looked at the page sitting square under the clips. Davis from Shed 12 shuffled up, read it, and nodded. Good. Steve, help me hang a camera in that corner? Tomorrow, I said. I'll bring my ladder. Deidre from Shed 7 peered over her glasses. I smelled a burnt tang last week. Thought it was somebody grilling. Now I'm scared. Put Sam's number in your phone, I said, writing it in the corner. Call. Don't be shy. That night I went home. The lunch box Mark had dropped off was still on the table from the morning they were arrested. I opened it. Roast chicken, potatoes, an apple. I warmed it up and ate slow. I didn't know if Leah cooked it or Mark did. I only knew I'd cooked for him more times than he'd ever cooked for me. I washed the plate, slid it into the cabinet, wiped the table. Small things, maybe, but small things keep a house a home. A week later, Sam called. Steve, we'll need you tomorrow for a supplemental note on the time you first saw the footage. I'll be there, I said. I'll bring printed copies of the checklist for the new row of sheds, too. You're the marina school teacher now, he joked. I'm just an old hand, I said. Old hands nag. The next morning, before I headed over, I stopped by the shed. The door swung open and the smell of damp wood and machine oil rose up like a ritual. I flipped the lights. The charcoal dust was gone. The scorched smear was scrubbed clean. I hung a white plastic sign and wrote in thick block letters, kill power before you leave. Double lock the door. Tell a neighbor if you'll be gone. I lowered the marker and breathed out. I'd thought a home was only walls that keep memories. Turns out it's also the place where you practice saying the clearest things to yourself. Don't forget the power. Don't trust the easy answer. Don't ignore a bad feeling. That afternoon, the community hall hosted a quick safety session. I talked for 15 minutes. Someone asked if I forgave my son. I said, I keep the lights on at the shed, the camera lens clean, the extinguisher charged, and a fresh page in the logbook. The rest needs time and a cool head. A woman in the front row said, "My grandson keeps asking me for money. I never know what to say." Hon, when you tell him no, you're telling yourself yes to your safety. I said, say it plainly. Write it down. That matters. Near dusk, Sam stopped by with a sack of donuts. Eat, he said. They're hot. I just had soup, I told him, and took half anyway. He sat at the window. I keep thinking about your line. Don't burn your own house down. It wasn't a line, I shrugged. It's just true. Some folks make a living striking matches, he said. Some post up to watch the flame. I'm a watcher, I said, sipping tea, and I'm teaching our neighbors to watch too. That's enough. It's enough for me, I said. As for Mark, I'm letting time do its job. Sam nodded. If he decides to turn back, you'll know. I'll be on the shore, I said, with a rope. Night set in. I walked him to the door. The sea air felt cooler than in the morning. Streetlights stepped down the road one by one. I know there'll be sleepless nights, sudden mornings when memory hits hard. Times I hear Mark's footsteps on the porch and it's nobody. I also know out there a neighbor will flip on a light if they smell something off. A widow has Sam's number in her phone. An old man grins because he learned how to change his camera password. And me, I still have these hands. Enough to tighten a loose bolt, check a breaker, hang another sign, set one more extinguisher in the right corner. Sometimes that's all it takes to stop a fire before it's born from a handful of nameless charcoal dust. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. Each of your likes, shares, and subscriptions is a great motivation for me to continue writing the next stories. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and see you again.